Morning. Morning. Reading from the New Revised Standard Version. Hear these words from Psalm 34, beginning with verse 1. Praise for deliverance from trouble. I will bless God at all times. God's praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul makes its boast in God. Let the humble hear and be glad. O magnify God with me, and let us exalt God's name together. I sought God, and God answered me, and delivered me from all my fears. Look to God, and be radiant. So your faces shall never be shamed. This poor soul cried, and was heard by God, and was saved from every trouble. The angel of God encamps around those who fear God, and delivers them. O taste and see that God is good. Happy are those who take refuge in God. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but God rescues them from them all. God keeps all their bones, not one of them will be broken. Evil brings death to the wicked, and those who hate the righteous will be condemned. God redeems the life of God's servants. None of those who take refuge in God will be condemned. Your ends this reading. Reading from the New Revised Standard Version, hear these words from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 10, beginning with verse 46. The healing of blind Bartimaeus. They came to Jericho. As Jesus and his disciples and a large crowd were leaving Jericho, Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the roadside. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout and say, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Many sternly ordered him to be quiet, but he cried out even more loudly, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus stood still and said, Call him here. And they called the blind man, saying to him, Take heart, get up, he is calling for you. So throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. Then Jesus said to him, What do you want me to do for you? The blind man said to him, My teacher, let me see again. Jesus said to him, Go, your faith has made you well. Immediately he regained his sight and followed him on the way. Here ends the reading. Thank you. It's remarkable how many famous people start out in life with the odds against them. For instance, Stephen Hawking, the world-famous physicist, was diagnosed with ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease, at the age of 21, which gradually paralyzed him. And when he lost his ability to speak, he communicated through a speech-generating device. Actor Tom Cruise, movie producer Steven Spielberg, Stephen Jobs, founder of Apple, all have dyslexia. Singer Justin Timberlake and Bill Gates, founder of Microsoft, both have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Oprah Winfrey came from a background of abuse. At the age of 13, Bethany Hamilton, surfing champion, lost her left arm in a shark attack. And what about Helen Keller, Harriet Tubman, Jimmy Owens, Ray Charles, to name just a few of those who are blind? We never know what kind of disadvantaged people around us may be facing, nor how hard someone has had to work to get to where they are. Today's scripture that she just read is about blind Bartimaeus. He was not only disadvantaged because of his blindness, he was also made to feel rejected by many in his community because of it. So much so that he was prevented to do anything with his life and ended up a beggar at the city gates with all the other beggars. He was an outcast in his society. We really don't even know his name, because his name means son of man. He was somebody who was ignored and even pitied. Many people in that day, especially the religious leaders, believed that a physical handicap was a punishment from God. That surely someone sinned if a child was born with a handicap. Bartimaeus, like every other beggar, had no chance of being successful in life. There were no audiobooks, no seeing eye docs programs for the blind, no cornea transplants or smartphone apps for the blind, no social programs like the Society for the Blind to help train him to be successful and do something. People later passed by, seeing him, they took pity on him. They passed by on the other side so they could just ignore him. Or maybe they threw in a coin or two, maybe grudgingly. Bartimaeus was pretty much on his own, trying to cope in a world of perpetual darkness, while all those around him lived in a beautiful world of light. There was little hope to see again, except for a miracle. But even though he was blind and a beggar, he was determined. And he refused to allow his disability to define who he was. So one day, as Jesus and his disciples were leaving Jericho, they came upon Bartimaeus sitting beside the dirt road begging. Even though he had never seen Jesus with his eyes, he had heard about him. And when he heard that it was Jesus who was passing by, he wasn't interested in receiving food or coins, but here was someone who might actually want to and would be able to help him in his situation. Here was someone who might be able to give him his life back, give him hope, purpose, and meaning. So he started to cry out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me, or have compassion for me." There were many in the crowd who started to scold him, telling him to be quiet. But Bartimaeus cried even out louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." He had affirmed Jesus as the Messiah, something the disciples didn't quite understand yet or had done. Jesus called for Bartimaeus to come over. Bartimaeus didn't walk to Jesus. He threw off his cloak, his only possession he had, and he ran to Jesus. No one was going to tell him to be quiet. He was excited. He was hopeful. Jesus said to him, and no one was going to tell him to be quiet. Jesus said to him, "Your faith has made you well. Your faith has healed you." Bartimaeus received his sight. And he was so excited, so thankful for Jesus that he decided to follow him. Notice that the main focus of the story isn't about the healing miracle itself, but on his belief, his faith, his determination. He wanted a better life, and he knew in his heart that Jesus could help him. This man had never seen Jesus with his own eyes, but though physically blind, he saw something in his heart, something else in Jesus that was more than a healer, teacher, preacher of Nazareth. The disciples had their physical sight, and yet they were still somewhat spiritually blind as to who Jesus was and what following Jesus was all about. So this was like a teaching moment for them. Bartimaeus was able to see spiritually with his heart. Jesus' healing for him said to him, "You really matter. You are a person of worth. God cares about you." And he knew that Jesus' gift to him meant that he must become a follower because he was moved by love and thankfulness. In this story, we see the power of Jesus' love. We see a Jesus who's concerned about the needs of even the most dejected and rejected in society. Religious leaders considered Bartimaeus a sinner, an outcast. When Jesus reached out to him, he showed Bartimaeus and everyone else he was a beloved child of God. The story says to each of us that God cares about us. God sees us as valuable and hears our prayers, knows our concerns. We have a sense of hope. God accepts us unconditionally and is with us every moment. That is worth celebrating and sharing. causes us to be spiritually blind? What causes us to keep quiet about our faith? So often we get put off by people who don't really push their faith on us, but who really express it in ways that we would not. And maybe we wish we could. We try to hush them. The story encourages us to be more like Bartimaeus, not be afraid to share God's love, which is about also following Jesus. If Jesus has made an impact on our life, why not share that with others so others can experience love and hope and faith? Why are we so free to shout and cheer for our favorite sports teams, but are hesitant to share about our faith by the words we speak, how we live our lives? This is something I don't think an experience I had personally that I don't think will ever leave me. When my mother turned 80, our family decided that we would take her out to our local hometown restaurant for to eat. So I had found this special birthday blessing that I thought would be nice to pray before our meal. Several family members, including my mother, thought it would be really nice to do that. But then there were several others who were totally against it and said that it would be inappropriate, almost like they were embarrassed to do so in a public restaurant. I was to keep it low. I asked if they were embarrassed about their faith, to which they replied, no, just don't want to impose it on others. And I explained that it wasn't imposing on others, especially since we were going to be in a separate part of the restaurant. And if it bothered other people, it wasn't, that was their issue, not ours. We were expressing what we felt. And ended up that I didn't say table grace, but I gave it to my mother later. And like I said, I still regret that I didn't do that. In the 1700s, how many of you have heard about the Moravian faith, the Moravian Church? Okay. Well, back in the 1700s, there was a noble Count Nicholas Zinzendorf from Austria. He had completed his training in law. And he was sent off to complete his education by touring European cities. And when he got to the art gallery in Dusseldorf, he came across a painting of Jesus. The eyes of Jesus seemed to just penetrate his heart. And beneath the painting were these words, "This I did for you. What are you doing for me?" Zinzendorf was never able to forget those words. So within a few years, he left public life and devoted himself to start a Christian community for fugitives from Moravia. That's the Moravian Church. I actually did my first internship in Chaska, Minnesota at a Moravian church. So faith is all about responding to who Christ is and what he's done for us. How about us? What are the things that we need to throw off, to let go of in our lives that no longer serve us? Things that are holding us back in our spiritual life in order for our hearts to be more open. Are there fears and worries, insecurities or doubts? Do we need to remove the scales from our eyes so that we can look beyond greed and prejudice and racism and narrow-mindedness and sexism and homophobia and all the other isms and all the other phobias and see people as precious children of God? Maybe we can ask God to help us have a more courageous and determined heart so as to not be afraid to speak up about our faith, to speak up for justice and peace. The story of Bartimaeus is a story of servanthood. Ironically, Jesus asked Bartimaeus the same question he had asked his disciples in the previous passage when they said to Jesus, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask." That's kind of selfish, isn't it? Jesus answered them as he did Bartimaeus, "What is it that you want me to do for you?" The disciples wanted glory in God's word. They wanted seats next to Jesus in the kingdom. They could have instead asked, "Give us hearts to see and follow you." When Jesus restored his sight, Bartimaeus was excited. He really was in touch with the Spirit of Christ. He didn't care about what people thought. Didn't let anything deter him from reaching Jesus. For him, following Jesus wasn't just a good idea or a fad or a nice self-improvement program. It wasn't a thing to do or a good habit to form. For Bartimaeus, as for many others, trusting that Jesus cares about them and wills good for them is indeed a matter of life and death. This is a story about bad news. As all stories of discipleship might be described as David Watson suggests, then finding our place in the story means asking ourselves what we truly value. For what are we willing to give up and leave behind? What's the cloak that we need to abandon? Who, or better yet, what is keeping us from reaching Jesus and sharing God's love with the people around us? So moved by God's love for us, may we go from here today to share that love with others with that excitement and joy in our hearts of God's love for us in the ways we speak and in the things